I started the game. I counted. Mm. So he basically did this. Now he was trying to take the pawn and basically launch an attack on, my pawn on f7 and d7 pawns. So it was gonna block it. So if he took it, it was gonna block it, and there was no way to take it. But what I did was to use my queen to actually check that place and make sure that I couldn't get out of there. Then he brought out his bishop. I knew he was going to concentrate his attack around their area, right? But still, I could not see his attack yet. I knew he was probably concentrated around this left square, left area next to my queen, all those particular areas. So what I did was to bring this guy to actually put pressure on the pawn so as to free my queen to actually make other decisions. That's exactly what I did. So he brought it as knight. I brought out my pawn as well to also ensure that the pawn in e5 is not an hanging pawn, right? So that's what I did. Also to free my knight as well. So he advanced his pawn. So I kind of called his bluff here, kind of like put pressure on that bishop because I was trying to think of a move. I wanted to go and attack, and I needed to put pressure on that bishop to know whether he's willing to get it out of there. So what he did was to then put pressure on my queen and also to block his pawn, his bishop as well. So I retreated my queen, of course, to safety. So what he didn't follow up with that. He could have followed up, but he did not follow up with that. As it being it brought his uh his bishop. Okay. He could not even do that. Anyway. Well, I castled as quickly as I could. It took mine over there and also still put pressure on my queen. It took the pawn and still put pressure on my queen. And I took back as well, knowing they couldn't take it and it was still protected by my knight. He advanced his pawn to also create that defense over there. Then I took the chance. This is where my attack began, really, in earnest. So I was protecting my bishop with my knight as well from this end, and my pawn as well was also protected from this end. I had an attack and I wanted to use it. I wanted to capitalize on that immediately. I was not going to play defensive game at all. We moved this king out. The issue with him is he didn't castle on time. As it being a castle on time, this game would have gone a certain direction. But he had to delay a little, and that gave me a little bit of an opportunity. So yeah, I quickly began to make the moves. But one thing I did, and this is a very big mistake, is to leave my bishop hanging, right? But from the way I looked at it, right, if he had taken my bishop, I'd have taken his bishop as well with my bishop, and then create a kind of a cross pawn. Because if he decided to take my bishop with his pawn, it will create a cross pawn. And I was looking for that cross pawn because I was looking for a space, an opening. I think he saw that. Okay, he didn't see it. Didn't see it. Either way, I did exactly the move. He didn't take it to create that cross pawn situation, right? So I took his to try to see him move. I also trying to, one thing I did with my knight was to ensure that the square for, e2 square and the c2 squares were blocked. So the queen cannot come out in that direction, which is what she desperately would want to do. She cannot do so. It will take about, you know, three moves, to get out of that spot, which is to go to, e1, then go to e3. She then put pressure on my knight, but even then she wouldn't be able to do that because my knight is protected. So she had to go to, uh, c3. so as to escape that situation. So that's a lot of work. And between then, I would have done something else. So she was essentially pinned over there. He retreated his bishop because I was putting pressure on his rook. So because I was putting pressure with my bishop, anyways. I could have actually taken um my bishop with his pawn, and that would have essentially de-escalated the entire situation because number one, there was no way for me to counter that. Now, him retreating was a very wrong move right now. So I brought out my queen to essentially, you know, ensure that that doesn't happen again. Now it put pressure on my rook. I think he thought that was going to, so I took it. I think he thought it was going to actually, he thought I was going to let that happen. Why could he do that? It was just a hanging knight. So I took it anyway. Now he's begun to try to look for a way to escape. This is the quickest route out of there anyway. The quickest route. But I believe that it would be not easy. He knows that okay, his king is also hanging, so he cannot afford to get his queen out of there. He can't afford to do so. So he started looking for a way to get his king out of there as well. He has to create a defensive system of, using this pawn to protect his king area. He wants to get his king out as quickly as possible. So I retreated to try to put pressure on that queen, just so I, find a way. Although it was a bluff, right? So one thing I also did was bring up my bishop, my knight, so that's to put pressure on this square, so the king cannot advance any further. The king cannot go to the g4 squares, and it cannot go to the f4 squares because of my pawn as well. So the king has to retreat back. That's exactly what he did. So I then tried to put pressure on his um castle, on his rook, as well as put pressure on his queen as well. And also to prevent a situation of, the rook interfering from that end, especially if I decide to take that side. Now, one thing I noticed I intentionally did was the moment they took the, bishop, it's white bishop, and I knew that this black bishop is essentially completely useless right now. So I decided to take it. That's exactly what I did. But his rook is not smart enough to also stay on the black end, protected by his black bishop. So I brought my rook into the mix. That's one thing I did. So his king is on check right now. I know that there's nothing he can do. He's gonna have to make a trade one time or the other, and that trade is gonna end the game as quickly as it starts. I intended to actually use this my rook to actually put pressure on this point, so he cannot escape from this point in any way, right? So I think he's saying that there's no hope for him right now, so he's trying to be desperate. Anyways, so he's becoming desperate, completely desperate. So I knew he was gonna take my rook. If he takes my rook, there'll be nothing I can do. So I had to make sure and also put pressure on the king as well. Because look at if I could take this particular pawn, and like if the king will literally have no option not to pass this direction, especially have closing the circle around the king. The rook can't do anything really. It's helpless. So I did exactly what I was planning to do, which is to put pressure on my on his pawn right there. Now, if he doesn't, I'll have to take it. Exactly what I did. I didn't take it because I knew that if I did it, I'd give him essentially what he wants. Essentially what he wants. So I brought that and took it out. I'm also trying to clear the path for my king, for my queen. It's actually what I did, right? So you had to scram. So I did that as well. See? And this is where the game starts getting interesting because he's pinned and all of them are pinned, and I think the game is all about them, but it's not. You see, the game is not about them at all. This is where it gets interesting. Totally interesting. Very, very interesting. As you can see, the game is already over.